What's up, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of my rattlesnake collection tour. And today we're going south of the border to some of my favorite Mexican rattlesnakes in the collection. In my opinion, the coolest rattlesnakes out there come from Mexico, and I'm very fortunate to work with a decent amount of the Mexican rattlesnakes that are available in the US hobby. So without further ado, let me show you some of my absolute favorite Mexican rattlesnakes in my collection. All right, now here is the first pair of snakes for this video. For any of you who checked out the last one of my US native Venomous, now we're taking a trip down south into Mexico. So these guys here are the Pena Nevada locality Tamalin rock rattlesnakes, so Crotalus lepidus marulus. So related to the US native stuff we took a look at last week, these guys are just a very, very special species of rattlesnake and a really cool locality at that. The sexual dimorphism within this species is really spectacular. This is the male here who's checking out what I have going on. The female is just chilling in the back. But they're known for these really cool kind of pastel colors and patterns throughout their body. Kind of almost look like they're animated in a way. They're really, really cool, kind of soft colors to them, even though they are really high contrast. The female has a really cool kind of copper striping down her back. They're definitely known to have a bit of a feeding response on them, which is exactly what you're seeing right here. He's very curious about what I have going on, and I wish we could focus on his head here, kind of get it a little bit. But yeah, such a cool species. One that's a little bit more plentiful in the hobby as far as the Mexican stuff goes. So if you're a Mexican rattlesnake fan and you are a keeper, this is one that you kind of can't go without. All right, so this guy here is one of my Mexican blacktail rattlesnakes. So for those of you who remember from last week, we took a look at two different localities from the United States of blacktail rattlesnakes. Well, there are plenty of blacktail rattlesnakes from Mexico as well. They have some pretty significant differences, mostly how they're much darker. The ones down in Mexico, like this guy right here, or the ones from the U.S. kind of have like a pale yellow to gold base color with some black pattern on them. These guys are kind of the opposite, where they have kind of a dark brown to black base color with some kind of yellow highlighted pattern, like this guy right here. He's a really cool dark head as well. And like I was saying from last week with the US blacktail rattlesnakes, the Mexicans are just as curious of a species, which I think is really cool. Makes working with them very, very fun. All right, and this here is my female Mexican black-tailed rattlesnake. She is far and away the largest rattlesnake I have in my collection. She is just an absolute beast of a snake. And she is just completely gorgeous as well. It's kind of hard to get an idea of her color with how the lighting is hitting her right now. Not quite as high contrast as the male, but it's kind of cool to have a pair where the individuals look different from one another. I don't know. I always prefer that in my snakes when there's some sexual dimorphism, and even if not sexual dimorphism, just kind of a different phenotype from one to another. But yeah, just a really beautiful species, and it's a really cool example to compare how they look from the US to Mexico as well. All right, so this is the last species of rock rattlesnake that we'll be taking a look at as far as a unique new species. This is the Durango rock rattlesnake, which is Crotalus lepidus maculosus. And what's really cool about these guys, amongst a lot of things, is their pretty extreme sexual dimorphism. So this is the male right here, head on the right. He has this really cool orange coloration where it's a little bit more reduced in the pattern, kind of like dots down the back almost. And over here on the left is the female, which you can see throughout her body. She's very mottled, kind of more of like a dark kind of charcoal coloration to her. This holds true with this species about 99% of the time, where this is the phenotype of the male, that's the phenotype of the female. Makes sexing them pretty easy. And it's also, for me, like I was saying with the blacktails, just really cool when the males and females look different. Kind of gives you a variety of looks within the collection, just the snakes that you're interested in. That's just something that I really love about all of these US and Central American rattlesnakes, is just how variable the complex is from a color and pattern standpoint. And these Durango rock rattlesnakes are a great example of that variability. All right, so this here is one of my pairs of Tarahumara banded rock rattlesnakes. So for any of you who saw my last video where I was showing most of my US native banded rock rattlesnake adults, you can see that these guys look very different from those that I showed in the previous video. And they look very different from some of the other Mexican banded rock rattlesnakes as well. These guys were in their own classification for a long time, that of semicornutus, but then they were lumped back in with collabori, with the rest of the banded rock rattlesnakes. But as you can tell, a very, very different appearance. Female here has some very pink sides. The lighting kind of washes it out, but they oftentimes will have kind of a cool teal coloration along their dorsal. Just a really, really unique look within rattlesnakes, and honestly, really within snakes. I can't think of many other species that have this kind of extreme level of patterning, and with as high contrast as they have it too, especially along the dorsal, like I was saying. And this is another one of the Tarahumara banded rock rattlesnakes. You can see a little bit better now, some of the depth of coloration. There's almost kind of some orange tipping throughout the sides on this girl. Let's see, her head's over here. You can really see that teal from behind the head. Their head is really, really cool too, where there's a lot of that pink tipping on some of those darker, more charcoal colored scales. There's really, really intricate snakes, lots of cool mottled pattern throughout their body, and really not banded like their name would suggest, being part of the banded rock rattlesnake species. But I think that's what makes them exceptionally cool when compared to all of their relatives like that. Just how unique this locality is. So show you guys this snake really briefly. This is my male Mexican pygmy rattlesnake, one of the rare Mexican species in the US hobby. Unlike the namesake suggests, these guys are not related closely in any way to the United States pygmy rattlesnakes, where those are within the Cistrurus genus, and this is still Crotalus. It's Crotalus ravis. This guy is deep in shed right now, so the extent of his coloration is not really coming out. But these guys are known for that blotched dorsal pattern that is very unique to this species, and one I'm very fortunate to have as part of my collection. They are just absolutely exceptional. All right, here's another really cool Mexican species. So this is the Queretaro dusky rattlesnake, or Crotalus achilles. And these guys are just absolutely phenomenal. Of this species, there's some pretty heavy sexual dimorphisms I'll show you guys. But this guy, he's really green with some yellow highlights throughout his body, just super cool, where there's a lot of color variance within this species. Their dorsal pattern is another really cool defining aspect of them. But one of the most defining aspects is their personality. These guys are kind of high strung compared to some other rattlesnakes. Really, really, really high feeding response. As in my opinion, I've seen with a lot of the Mexican species compared to the US species, that they're kind of turned up to an extra gear, which definitely makes them a lot of fun, but you have to be pretty careful with them as well. I've raised this guy up from a little baby. He is absolutely spectacular, and one that I hope can be a father in the not too distant future. All right, here's my other male Achilles. And as you can tell, some similar look, but a bit different. This guy's a little bit more on the blue-green side, where that last male is a little bit more on the yellow-green side. I think it's really cool to have both of those kind of phenotypes present in the collection. This guy's an absolute beast. Just an amazing snake, and very curious about what I'm doing, kind of like what I was saying in that previous clip, how these guys are a little bit more high-strung than some of the other rattlesnakes, but that makes them extra fun to work with. And now here's my female Achilles. So as you can tell from looking at her compared to those two males, very, very different, super sexually dimorphic, where she kind of has that kind of pink overlay on a charcoal base. Very, very cool look. You know, obviously to me and probably to most, the appearance of the males probably a bit more visually appealing than this. But like I was saying before, I really love when there is sexual dimorphism within these species that I work with. I think it just makes a display enclosure with them that much more brilliant, to where you see how contrasted they are. But yeah, she's an incredible snake. Like I was saying with the male, I love the dorsal pattern. I love how much tighter her dorsal pattern is, where the blotches are a bit smaller and a lot closer together, and those sides are kind of lightly mottled irregularly throughout the body. One of the coolest Mexican rattlesnake species, in my opinion, and the opinion of most people who keep Mexican rattlesnakes. All right, this here is a species that is very special to me. These are the San Luis Potosi rock rattlesnakes, and as of now, these guys are considered a natural intergrade of Crotalus achilles and Crotalus lepidus marulus, which is really, really interesting. And that resulting intergrade is a population that is extremely variable, and potentially the most variable of all the rattlesnakes. Truly no two of them look alike, where their colors will range from yellow, red, orange, black, some blue, green. I mean, it's and really almost anything you could think of in between. Lots of pattern variants as well. You can see this girl kind of has that like almost like a yellow dorsal stripe underneath the saddles of the red saddles, where that yellow goes throughout the body but is broken up by those overlaying saddles. Where the male here kind of has a little bit more of an irregular saddle pattern, and then kind of a really cool defined bar behind his head. Like I was saying on the Achilles, how they have a bit more of a personality to them. These guys definitely take that on as well. They're behaving very well right now, but when feeding time comes around, they can definitely get themselves into a bit of a frenzy, but it definitely makes them fun to interact with. And here is another of my adult females from the same locality. As you can see, she has a much different appearance than those other ones. She is in shed right now, but even when not in shed, she has a lot more of a deep red coloration to her, and kind of a bit of a charcoal base to her. A little bit of that kind of faded yellow along the dorsal, similar to what the other female had, but that girl had it much more prominently. Another example of why I love this type so much. Any species that has as much variety as these do typically piques my interest, really no matter what kind of snake it is. All right, so now we have made it to one of my, if not potentially my favorite rattlesnake species outside of the ridge-nosed rattlesnakes, and that is Crotalus polystictus, or the Mexican lancehead rattlesnake. That common name comes from their shocking resemblance to the Bothrops genus, the lanceheads. That color and pattern, and even the head shape, is very Bothrops-like. Their physicality is quite different than the rattlesnakes we have seen so far. They're a bit larger, a bit longer bodied, and they have that really cool head structure that you can see right here. They're super variable as well. Some of them have that more textbook look like this female has, with that really cool kind of reticulated webbing throughout their body, kind of a brown and kind of off-white essentially. But then there's ones like this male that have a bit more orange coloration in him as well. He's a beast of a snake. He's probably my biggest rattlesnake besides my blacktails. He's very long and formidable. Like a lot of these other Mexican species that we've been talking about, these guys can have a bit of a, I don't want to say an attitude, but a zest for life, let's say. They can be quite fast and determined to do what they want to, which makes them very fun. But yeah, that almost kind of spider webbing, reticulated pattern on them, especially with how high contrast it is, just really makes this species special. All right, here's another one of my lancehead rattlesnakes. This is actually the first one that I ever got. Raised her from about a year and a half old to now I don't want to say full grown, but an adult. They will continue to grow throughout their life, but a bit different as far as the phenotype goes from the one we just looked at, where a bit lighter than the female, not quite as brilliant with that orange coloration as the male, but a really cool, very high contrast look to this girl with the webbing. Oops, sorry about that. Let's get that refocused. And like I was saying, with their attentiveness and their disposition, she's very curious to check out what I have going on. I had to let her know before filming this that I was not, in fact, feeding her. But what's really cool about rattlesnakes in general, in my experience, is that they figure out stuff really quick. They're really quick to catch on to routine. And when I work with them, I don't remove them from their enclosures. I use tools that are long enough to stay out of their strike range. And truly, I can, clean my entire rattlesnake collection of about 80 individuals in a day and not have a single snake throw a strike at me. And I equate that to they are very accustomed to how I interact with them, how I clean their enclosures, do their water changes, etc., to where they don't see any threat from me interacting with them. And then they also know when it's food time and when it is not. And this is another pair of my lancehead rattlesnakes. That's the female there who is paying attention to what I have going on. The male is there just chilling. He is potentially my best looking lancehead rattlesnake, where he has that really cool orange on the dorsal, those white outlines on some of those side patterns, and just really a brilliant overall coloration and pattern. The female is a little bit more typical, kind of like the last one we were looking at, maybe a tad bit on the darker side. But I don't know. To me, there's no such thing as a bad looking lancehead rattlesnake. They're all incredible. I'm hoping that these guys can get the job done and potentially have some babies. And if any of them came out looking like that male, it would be really hard for me to consider parting with those snakes. As like I have said a couple of times now, aside from the ridge-nosed rattlesnakes, these may be my absolute favorite rattlesnake. All right, grand finale time here as far as the species complex goes. This is a pair of my Chihuahuan ridge-nosed rattlesnakes, which is Crotalus willardi silas. So of the ridge-nosed rattlesnakes, these are definitely the ones that are most commonly seen. They're bred by a handful of people in the United States and have probably been the ones that are the most historically available. With that said, though, that is within reason, considering some of the other ridge-nosed rattlesnakes are entirely unavailable in the hobby. But as you can see, the color difference between these guys is pretty stark. The female has a bit more of a gray coloration to her, and the male is really, really brilliant orange, where that orange really overtakes his body and drowns out some of the pattern that's in there. So from an angle like this with lighting like this, he almost looks like an orange patternless ridge-nosed rattlesnake. But as the namesake suggests, that unique face shape is what gives him that ridge-nosed rattlesnake namesake. They're a pretty small species of rattlesnake where it's hard to see, get a scale from this video. But this male is the largest one that I've ever seen. And the female is smaller than many of my other adult rattlesnakes. And they are pretty mild-mannered as well in my experience. Obviously, I'm not reaching in here and grabbing them, free-handling them like an idiot. But when it comes to maintenance and care, they are one of the easier rattlesnakes that I have to deal with. All right, and now to bring it all full circle with the snake that I could only close out these videos with. This is my favorite venomous snake in my collection, and he was actually also my first ever venomous snake that I bought. He is a Del Nido ridge-nosed rattlesnake, or Crotalus willardi amabilis, that you will almost never see in a captive setting. I got really, really fortunate that I had a friend who was letting go of a surplus male he had at the time, and I snatched him right up. I have not been able to locate a female, and honestly, part of me doubts I ever will, which is okay with me because I absolutely love having this individual. The amabilis are known for that incredible orange and red coloration that I think may be the best looking venomous snake in the entire world. They have those eye stripes that the Silas do not have. That's one way to tell the Silas apart from the other willardi, is that top eye stripe will be absent on Silas, but on the other types like amabilis, meridionalis, and willardi, that is present. Those facial markings are absolutely amazing. That color is just out of this world. There's a reason why this is my favorite species of rattlesnake. All right, everybody, thank you for checking out that video. If you liked it, please subscribe here on the YouTube channel. I drop a new video every single Friday. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Instagram at Scrub Shepherd, Stephen Cush on Facebook, and Cush Reptile on Morph Market. I also host a podcast every Wednesday night called Cush's Corner on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, and that is at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, thank you guys for checking out the video, and I'll catch you all back here next week for a new one.